Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Nathan Nerdark.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
Today we can continue our Learn to Play Dungeons & Dragons series with our intro into D&D Magic. Let's start this video by thanking our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice. Whether it's your first set of dice or your 100th set of dice, Easy Roller Dice. In the description below, you can find a link to get a one-time 20% discount code for Easy Roller Dice. Go get your Easy Roller Dice.
Alright, so we're continuing our series of Intro to D&D, and this time we're going to talk about magic and spells.
Right, and we're going to break this one up into two parts for you guys, and this is kind of part one.
Right.
So in part one, the first thing we have to say, well, what is magic in D&D? What does that even mean?
Well, in a fantasy world, magic exists. It's this spectrum of energy that certain characters have the ability to tap into or access to be able to produce non-standard effects.
Right, as well as certain monsters as well, and some of them are actually made of this stuff of magic. So basically, there is essentially two types of magic in D&D.
So we're going to have arcane magic, and we're going to have divine magic.
Typically, divine magic is going to be given to certain spellcasting classes from a deity, while just arcane magic is going to be more on the lines of wizards and sorcerers, and it's going to come from the actual caster rather than from the deity.
Would you say one of them actually manipulates the energies that are there, while in the case of the arcane caster, where the divine caster, they're actually being granted their magic powers from someone else?
Yes.
I think that's a good sum up.
But then there is the warlock who kind of muddies the waters a little bit, because he is actually granted a sliver of power from another source, but it is still considered arcane magic.
So that definitely makes a difference or a change from the normal spectrum.
So with that in mind, we now know we have several different ways of obtaining magical power. Now the question is, what do we do with that magic?
Well, once you've been able to tap into that source, you're able to have a list of spells and be able to cast them. And with that, there's different ways to actually go about casting them.
So you actually have what are called cantrips as one of those ways, and that's just like it's a low power form of spell, and the spells actually have spell levels, right? So when we're talking about cantrips, we actually start at 0.
And your cantrips actually don't have any limitations to them as in regards to the number of times that you could cast them over a day, whereas regular spells, things that are first and above, do.
Yeah, the idea behind the cantrip is it is a spell that is so ingrained in your caster that he can just cast it essentially at will.
Yeah, it's easy as walking and talking to them.
All right, so as we said, the cantrips start at essentially 0. Then you have other spells that are within the levels of 1 through 9.
And those use spell slots.
Right, and we'll get into spell slot usage later.
Right, and underneath of those spells, there's also, some of them have special tags. In this case, it's a ritual tag, which means it's a spell that you can actually cast without those slots.
Now, the first thing to note is that not all casters have access to rituals. So you might have access to a spell, but not be able to ritualize it.
That's true. Only certain casters actually have the ritual caster class feature.
But if you do have such a feature, and you have access to that spell, you have the ability to cast it. It takes you a longer time to perform it, a longer casting time, if you will, but it does not use up the resource of your spell slots.
So typically rituals are something you're going to do when you're not in a combat round situation, and time allows you to basically take your time and slowly go through the spell. If you're in the case of a wizard, you may actually go to your spell book and you're literally reading it from it. Perhaps you're a divine caster like a cleric, and it happens to be one of your prepared spells for the day, and you might beseech your deity in a long prayer session in order to access that magic.
You might be reading it off a scroll. You might be sprinkling holy water or lighting incense and chanting in a circle. There's a variety of ways that you could role play what it is that you're actually doing.
So that brings us next to prepared spells versus known spells.
Well, and this is getting into the more complicated aspects of being a spellcaster. Some spellcasters have access to their full list, and you have to choose what spells you're able to cast today, whereas other casters, when they're making their characters or leveling up, they have to make these hard choices of, well, what does my character have access to?
And those would be the known spells.
Yeah, every character class that's a spellcaster, they have their own special rules for how many spells you can know or how many spells you can prepare per day. Now, with spells known and spells prepared, one of the key differences, preparing means each day you spend a set amount of time in preparation, and for that day, these spells are on your list, and they're the only spells that exist for you, essentially. But each day you get to change that out. Spells known is a little bit different. You have a list of spells you know. You always just know those spells. There are certain circumstances that let you change them out, but you do not get to change them out on a daily basis like a prepared list.
But when you have spells known, they're always considered prepared. You always have the ability to just cast from that list using, again, those spell slots.
Yeah, there's definitely certain classes that are going to have benefits and drawbacks because of the way they cast spells. They're going to be very specific to the type of caster they are. For instance, a sorcerer who is an arcane caster that has a list of spells that he just knows, he can never be divested of that list. He always has it. The same thing with your divine casters that pray for their spells every day. Again, they can never lose access to that. They can always pray for more spells. The caveat here is probably for the wizard, who also prepares spells, but he prepares them from a book that he owns. And if anything ever happens to that book, he cannot refer to it to prepare more spells.
So that is the downside. The wizard has the most versatility in regards to his magic, because it's literally written into his character class that as he adventures and finds things, he has the ability to either buy or find new spells, put them into his book, giving him more options for what he can choose to prepare from.
But he has that Achilles heel of possibly losing all the spells he has.
So next we have spell slots, and we're going to discuss a little bit what they mean for each of your characters.
So each character class, if you look at that chart, shows you based on the character level what spell slots they actually have based on each level, and that's typically per day, although each class has the ability to get them back at different times. So once you use up those spell slots, you are not going to be able to cast any spells of that level anymore for that duration.
Right, and as we discussed before, your spells go from 0 to 9th level. 0th level spells for spell slots we don't actually have to worry about, because we just use those whenever we like. Now, 1st through 9th is completely different, as Ted has said, is you have X amount depending on your character class level, and you can use those. Now, that being said, if you've used up all of your 1st level spell slots, but you would like to cast a still cast one, and you have 2nd level spell slots, you can always use a higher level spell slot to cast a lower level spell.
So this is just an overview into Magic. We're going to get more in depth next week into the mechanics of spell casting, and let us know if you have any questions down in the comments below, and either ourselves or one of our awesome fans will be more than happy to answer it for you. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Don't forget to visit the description where you can find that link and coupon code for Easy Roller Dice for that 20% discount.
You can also read the articles over at nerdarchy.com.
So until next time, stay nerdy.